Hey party people, Techno here again at the Sans Holiday Hack Challenge 2023. In the previous video, we wrapped up the second and final challenge to be found here on Frosty's Beach, and that was becoming a snowball hero, of course. So what we need to do now is set sail and seek out the next destination on our adventure and the next challenge that awaits us. So we're just gonna do a quick skip back to our wonderful galleon and hit the high seas to follow the coastline around Christmas Island and find the next location that we're off to. Now, one thing about this year's Holiday Hack Challenge is there are some races out here on the high seas. That's what those buoys that we just passed are. And there's also a fishing component to this. So as you get close to land, you can cast your line and catch some fantastical creatures that live beneath the blue waters around the Geese Islands. That's something that we'll probably save towards closer to the end here rather than take the time as we go through the various challenges. We'll wrap up all of the fishing challenges as we get closer to the end. So here we've arrived at another stop on Christmas Island. This is Rudolph's Rest, so let's go ahead and dock and head ashore to see what we can find. Just follow this convenient path here, and I can already see in the upper left-hand corner what looks like our next challenge. Cranberry Pie Terminal there, and Noel Bowtie might have some information for us about what this is that we need to do. So this is the Reportinator challenge. Let's go ahead and open up the badge and just take a quick look at this under the objectives. All right, Reportinator, we have it right here. It looks like there's going to be an Azure challenge later on this location. So this is a 2 out of 5 Christmas tree challenge. Noel Bowtie used ChatNPT to write a pen test report. I guess that's a good idea, maybe. Go to Christmas Island and help him clean it up. All right, well, we're here, so let's see what Noel has to say about this. Not too surprising for an LLM. I don't know about that so much, but we'll definitely do our best with this one. All right, Noel, well, we will certainly try to make this report the best that it can be. Let's go ahead and take a look at some hints that we've gathered here after chatting with Noel regarding the Reportinator challenge. And we do have one. It states that AI sometimes can get the specifics wrong. Now, I think that's a slight understatement. Unless the prompts are well written, that's key. Maybe ChatNPT made some mistakes here. And that seems to be what we're going to need to find out. So clicking on the Cranberry Pie terminal, we see the pen testing report that this ChatNPT language learning model generated. And it looks like what we have here is two options. So we have a green check mark representing a legitimate finding, red X to represent a hallucinated or false finding. And as we read through here, we have an executive summary, the scope, and then we finally get to the findings. So for each one of these findings, we can toggle this to either be a legitimate finding or a hallucination. And it looks like there are a total of 9 findings in this report. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So with this year's Holiday Hack Challenge, there's a heavy emphasis on language learning models, AI. So I assume that one of the things that you're intended to do with this challenge is to probably use something like ChatGPT to go through and find out where some of these hallucinations may be, digging into that at a deeper level. Not exactly the approach that I took to this challenge. The first thing that I tried to do was simply read through all of the findings and then see if anything obvious jumped out to state that didn't make sense. This is obviously a hallucination. This doesn't seem like a legitimate finding. That exercise turned out to be a little bit more difficult than first anticipated, and that's because there are a lot of things throughout the findings here that struck me as at least being not quite right, but I was grossly overestimating how many of these qualified for the purposes of the challenge as a hallucination, and which ones were in fact legitimate findings. So another approach that we can take with this falls well outside of the AI language learning model, and that is to think about this as a form submission, which it is, right? So we have, for each of these 9 findings, we have the possibility of creating a Boolean choice, really, a true-false. Is it a legitimate finding or is it not? So one thing that we can do is we can find out exactly how that's being submitted and what that looks like. And to do so, let's just toggle one of these to a hallucination, leave the rest as legitimate findings. That way we can kind of see what the inputs look like. There should only be 2. And we're going to go ahead and open up our developer tools, just like we did for the Snowball Hero challenge. But this time we're going to be looking at the requests and responses that are sent. So we're going to go to the network tab over here. And once that loads up, we're going to be looking specifically at the XHR section. And once we have our selections made in here, or one selection, let's just submit this and see what happens. What are we looking at? So we see a post request going out there. We do have a failure, which it would be falls in line with that status, that 400 code for the status. But if we take a closer look at this post request, we can see how that was sent. And here we see that form data, and again, our 9 inputs corresponding to those 9 findings, and then those are represented as either a 1 for the hallucination or a 0 for the legitimate finding. Again, that binary choice, that kind of true-false Boolean value. So now that we know a little bit more about what the request is that we're actually sending, it stands to reason that we can brute force this. If we think of this as having basically a key space, let's say we have 2 positions for 9 potential inputs, right? So that would be 2 to the 9th power. That would give us about 512 combinations. One of those combinations is going to be the successful one to submitting this form. And we can go ahead and leverage a tool like Burp Suite to brute force this form page and then work our way backwards. Once we know what the actual hallucinations are, maybe we can read through the material and assess what in fact makes them hallucinations versus legitimate findings. So we can go ahead and close these developer tools out. We're not going to need that anymore. But what we are going to need is Burp Suite, and we're going to need to turn on the Burp proxy. So first off, let me just go ahead and enable my proxy to burp in Firefox. And then we will go to Burp Suite itself and we'll turn intercept to on under proxy. And now we're just going to submit that request one more time. So now we've captured that request. The next thing that we need to do is send this to intruder so we can brute force that. And now we'll click over to the intruder tab. And this is where we need to define our payload markers. So again, we have those 9 inputs, and everywhere that we have one of these numeric values, we want to create that payload input. And we can really call this whatever we want. So let's just call this bool or something along those lines. Now we want to copy this out and paste it into each of those 9 positions. And the other important aspect of this is going to be selecting the appropriate attack type. The first option here is sniper. It's not going to be the one that we want. So basically we need to test every possible combination for each of these 9 inputs. And to do that, we're going to need to use the cluster bomb payload or the cluster bomb attack type. Finally, we need to define our payload for each one of these, which is going to be that 0 and 1 value. And instead of manually entering that into these simple lists, just going to grab my text editor for a moment. What we want in each of these lists is simply the 0, 1 option. So now we can go ahead and copy this, and then paste it in. And we need to do this for each of the 9 positions that we have payload markers set for. All right, now we have our attack type selected. We have the parameters that we want to fill in defined, and we have our payload defined. And as you can see here, for each one of these, we have a payload count of 2 across 9 sets, making a total request count of 512. Once we have that all set up and ready to go, we can go ahead and start the attack. Okay, we're going to be rate limited in the community edition, but that's fine, not an issue here. So we're going to see this start to showcase, and it looks like I hit that twice, so we don't really need to do this 2 times over. We can discard this one. And what we're going to be most interested here is that, or most interested in, is that status code. So we saw the incorrect submission came back with a 400 status code. So really, we're going to look for whichever status code ends up being different. Presumably, it's going to be a 200 status code, but we'll see. And it's going to be the correct answer to the challenge. It's going to take a little bit of time to run. So we'll go ahead and speed this up now, so we're not sitting here just waiting on this to complete, and review the results whenever we get that positive status code back. So, cue time warp. All right, after speeding up time for a bit, I've been periodically checking on the results that our attack has produced. So the attack is ongoing right now. We're still sending out requests. We're about 298 requests out of 512 in at this point in time. But along the way, something interesting happened. So sorting on these status codes, we can see that rather than the 400, we got a 200 response, indicating a successful submission. So let's go ahead and just pause this because we don't need to see the rest of the results. If we go ahead and click on that request, we can look at what the successful form submission actually was. So here in the input section, we can see that input number 3 was marked as a hallucination, input number 6 was marked as a hallucination, and input number 9 was marked as a hallucination. So 3, 6, and 9 are the hallucinations, and all of the others are legitimate findings. This is the combination that is going to solve the challenge. So now let's go back, and while we could, within the proxy, send a response with this altered input to go ahead and forward that and solve the challenge, we can also just exit out of Burp, discard the results of this attack. We know that it's 3, 6, and 9 that we're looking for. Let's just exit out of all of this. And I'm going to turn off the proxy. And we can go through and mark these. And along the way, we can kind of look at what these findings are and figure out why they might have been marked as hallucinations, or what made them hallucinations. So here, if we look at this finding for remote code execution and read through it, there's a couple things in here that stand out as just being flat out wrong. This states that it intercepted HTTP request traffic on port 88,555 TCP. Well, that's impossible because there are only 65,000 and change TCP ports. So this would be an obvious error in the report. And then here at the end, we also have this vulnerability is classified as CWE 502. Probably means CVE, but that CWE might be another reason that this was marked as a hallucination. So proceeding on, let's go down to finding number 6. We can go ahead and mark this one as no good. And let's take a brief glance at this to see if anything stands out. And right up front, here towards the beginning, this does stand out. HTTP send. HTTP send is not a valid HTTP request method. So that's probably one reason that this was flagged as a hallucination, and there might be others in here as well. So let's go to finding number 9, our last hallucination, and see what we have there. Go ahead and mark this as that hallucination. And let's see if we can find anything in here that stands out as being decidedly wrong. And again, with the HTTP, we see a HTTP 7.4.33 request. No idea what that is. So again, that could be one of the errors. There could be more, but definitely an error in here that leads this to be a hallucination rather than a valid finding. So now that we've marked those, let's go ahead and submit this and see what happens. And we completed the challenge. Shouldn't be any surprise because Burp already told us that that was going to be the correct answer. But now let's exit this out and see what Noel has to say about the assistance that we provided. Solid advice from Noel there. So that's going to be it for this video, this Reportinator challenge in the Holiday Hack Challenge 2023. In the next video, we will tackle that Azure challenge we saw listed on the badge in this same area, Rudolph's Rest on Christmas Island. And then from there, again, we'll hit the high seas and see where our adventures take us. So until then, thank you very much for watching, everybody. I do truly appreciate it. Take care, and I will catch you later.